Welcome everybody. Today we are going to learn the difference between overloading and overriding a method in Python. These are two important concepts that you need to understand before you can really consider yourself a master in object orientation in Python. And as I mentioned multiple times, you need to know the terminology in order to be able to talk to other persons. And to become a kind of good Python communicator. And good communication skills is important in any area, especially if you are a coder. You need to communicate with the computer, you need to communicate with other people. So let's dive right into it. Let's learn a few more vocabularies in our Python language, and I will dive right into it. Okay, so the question is, what is the difference between method overloading and method overriding in Python? Note that it is not overwriting but overriding in Python. I will explain it to you what's the difference here. Okay, so first of all, let's consider example for method overloading in Python. So say we have the class wizard, and it has some constructor. The first variable is always the self variable of any class method or instance method, and the second, say it's a mana, so it's his remaining energy to perform some magical tricks. And we set the mana level to the mana attribute, instance attribute, to the mana level defined in the constructor. Okay, so now we have this kind of one method, and now we have a method stupor, which is, say, a magical trick. First parameter is always to the self, to the instance itself. Second parameter is the other person. So say it's a magical trick we want to perform on another person or another wizard, basically, and this other variable is the other wizard. And then suppose we actually want to do this. We want to do this method, but we also kind of want to have. So now I will define this method in a moment. Let's use none here. And what I also want to do is to have the same method, but with another parameter called damage, and none. So actually this is what I want to achieve often. If I don't know about method overloading in Python, then I would maybe try to do this thing. The problem is that in Python you cannot define different methods with the same name, because they would kind of clash. This should throw an error if I execute this. For example, say I'm creating a wizard called Tom, and so he needs a mana level, say 112, and Dumbledore is also wizard, maybe has mana level 151, and nothing happens. Okay, now say I want to, basically what the thing this still works is that we kind of override the stupor method. So I'm not overloading the stupor method, but I'm overwriting the method. For example, if I want to execute stupor on Dumbledore, so basically this one would be the call to the first method I have defined here, and let's say whether this works, and now this doesn't work because it needs another parameter called damage, and this parameter damage here is required by the second method. And you can see that actually Python does not allow multiple methods with the same name to coexist. Basically it simply overrides the first method with the second method, because I have defined the second method after the first method. So this idea of overloading the same method with different parameter sets does not work. Yeah, so we cannot. That's basically method overloading is allowing different parameters for calling the same method, and this actually does not work. And but the idea in Python that you can use is to define all the parameters you want to have, and basically allow some default parameters. Say the third parameter damage is a default parameter, so if you don't specify the damage parameter, then it would take the default value as you give after this equal, as you pass after the equal symbol here. Okay, so this now, if I execute this code snippet, it should work. Yeah, it doesn't throw an error anymore, because now I can use the function stupor with only one argument, or also with 2 arguments. As you see, it doesn't throw an error anymore. Okay, so let's implement this stupor method. What exactly does it do? So if self mana, so if I have enough mana left, say it's larger than 100, then we damage the other person's mana. Otherwise, we do nothing basically. So this stupor method only works if we have if our mana level is larger than 100. Okay, and yeah, so and we damage, the default damage is 50. So if I don't redefine the default damage, then it will basically result in only 50 damage. Okay, so suppose Tom and Dumbledore are fighting against each other. So now Tom reduces Dumbledore's mana level by the default value. Now Dumbledore strikes back, reducing Tom's mana level by a large factor of 200. And now Tom is kind of desperate, so for 10 times he tries to hurt Dumbledore. Yeah, and now we simply print Tom's mana level and Dumbledore's mana level. So this is a small code puzzle. Try to, for E in range. Okay, try to solve it yourself. Now I already gave you the solution. Tom's mana level is 88 because initially Tom damages Dumbledore, so Dumbledore's mana level drops from 151 to the default damage to 101. So Dumbledore still has some mana beyond 100. So if Dumbledore strikes back, he reduces Tom's mana level by 200. So we have 112 minus 200, which is minus 88. And now Tom has a negative mana level, so even if you would replace this by 1000, it could not hurt Dumbledore, because you would never go into this if branch and never do any damage. Okay, that's the reason why we have the result minus 88 and 101. Okay, so now this is an example for method overloading. Yeah, you can see we have one method, and we can call the method with multiple different parameter sets. We can use one argument or 2 argument. You can even have other arguments and use them within our method, or even ignore them. So we can have as many arguments as we want here. And each time we make an argument optional, we simply have to specify the default value. In this case, you would not be required to define the default value in order to call the method. Okay, this is method overloading. So what is method overriding? Basically, method overriding overrides the functionality of a method that is defined in a parent class. Okay, so now let's have a look at some different application. So we do method overriding actually. So now we need, for example, we can define a class Muggle. This is still using the Harry Potter example, and Muggle can convince somebody. For example, say we have the first argument is always self. We have another person, reference to another Muggle instance, and we have a thing. Oh no, let's make this string value, which is more simple. So we have reference to ourselves, string value to another person, and a thing that we want to convince the other person to do. And now suppose, what is the standard way for Muggles to convince somebody? I don't know, maybe it's please other person, this is the string value of the other person, do something. Yeah, this is something to do. So for example, we would create a Muggle called Petunia. And now if Petunia wants to convince Harry to clean up. Yeah, if you execute this, then we would have the output, please Harry clean up. So this is a kind of the Muggle way to convince somebody. But now suppose, so Harry actually is not a Muggle, but he's a wizard. And a wizard is basically also a Muggle. So he has all the properties and skills of normal Muggles, but also some skills more. So suppose we could, for example, we could define more skills. Maybe the Muggle class could also have some more skills, but we don't care about this at the moment. So we have a wizard is also a Muggle, but not all Muggles are wizards. Okay, so but if the wizard tries to convince somebody, then he would not use actually the Muggle way of convincing other. Yeah. So suppose Harry is the bad wizard, then he would not ask Petunia to do something with using the phrase please, but he would use the phrase Imperius. This is the bad wizard way to convince other people. And we have some parameter to the wizard magic phrase. Yeah, so we want to convince them to do a certain thing. Yeah. So we have Imperius, then we name the other person and convince them to do the thing, as Petunia did, but only with our keyword Imperius. So this is kind of the wizard way to convince people. So if Petunia tries to convince Harry, then Harry might convince. Now first we have to define Harry. Harry is basically a wizard. Harry could convince Dudley to clean up as well. Now, okay, and now Harry's way of convincing Dudley is Imperius, Dudley, clean up. So again, what happens here is we define a parent class, Muggle, and a child class, Wizard. Wizard inherits all the attributes and all the instance methods from the Muggle parent class. Also, it inherits the instance method convince with the two parameters, other and thing. And if we did not override the convince method, then Harry's way suppose the wizard is exactly the same, then Harry's way of convincing other persons would be exactly the same as other Muggles, the normal Muggles way of convincing somebody. Just ask them to do something. But basically, as he is a wizard, we override the method convince. We do not override it. Not override. So we are not overwriting the method because the method still consists in the parent class convince. We are only overriding the method. Only for our child class, we use a different method convince, and we define it as shown in the code example. Okay, so now you have learned two things: overloading a method and overriding a method. And overloading a method means that you allow multiple sets of parameters for the same method name, and overriding a method means that you redefine the functionality for child classes in your object-oriented programming. Okay, thanks for listening to this video, and see you soon.